All right, Mark, millions of people voted for Donald Trump and his mass deportation plan. Now it appears that he fully intends to carry this out with the military doing this work. Are we ready for this?
I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I don't know if the government is ready for it. I mean, the execution of something like this, I mean, whether the military is involved or not, is a spectacular logistical challenge. I mean, even maybe 500,000 would be, I mean, let alone 10 million or whatever numbers we're talking. We're talking chaos. We're talking massive disruption. My guess is that Trump at some point will probably just focus on a few symbolic things like, some wall building, a few high profile cases, and maybe sort of say, look, this is all getting done, cook the numbers a little bit and say, yeah, this is happening. But no, I mean, this is chaos of orders of magnitude more than we've ever seen.
Carol, specifically on the military aspect, to kind of the point Mark was just making, how likely is it that he's going to be able to clear all the legal hurdles that are going to make this thing happen? Because the scale is massive.
I think it's absolutely right that the scale is going to be a big worry. And I'm with Mark on the idea that Trump will want to have some bold symbolic gestures. But even if we're talking a few thousand people, it's going to be massive. And then you're going to have a series of organizations, rightly, in many cases, filing legal challenges, questioning the appropriateness of, for example, separation of families, which is not a legal matter at our border. We aren't allowed to separate families. You may remember in the last administration, Donald Trump told his DHS secretary and other border security officials that he would just pardon them, just separate the kids from the families, and I'll pardon you later if it turns out to be a crime. I do think one thing you're going to find here is that all sorts of different networks of military officials are going to question the legality of them being enlisted in this mission. And that will be also very interesting. Who stands up and says, I'm sorry, my organization is not going to be able to be commandeered for this purpose?
All right, well, then let's talk money, because Donald Trump told NBC News that there was no price tag on this plan. Now, one immigrant rights group said this could cost about $90 billion a year. And we've talked about this before. It would lower GDP. It would severely affect industries that desperately need workers. We have over 7 million open jobs in this country right now. Leanne, do people realize the real world impact, the economic impact this is going to have on our government and our economy?
No, absolutely not. That is not something that was talked about on the campaign trail when Donald Trump campaigned heavily and primarily on deporting undocumented immigrants. This was central to reasons why he got elected or reelected. Talking to voters across the country, this is the issue of immigration is something that people mentioned. Tough border security is what they say they liked about Donald Trump, and a weak border is something that they didn't like about President Biden. And Kamala Harris was unable to separate herself from that. But the economic impact could absolutely be massive when all of a sudden there's entire plants or factories in towns that are completely void of workers. And the business owners are wondering how they're going to get the work done because the workers aren't going to be there, Steph.
All right. I always want to talk about economics. So let's talk about the Treasury Secretary pick, because up until now, it has been Scott Bessent and Howard Lutnick. Scott Bessent, who has a long history in finance, a well-known investor. He kind of got poo-pooed last week. It was Howard Lutnick's camp trashing him because years ago, Scott Bessent worked for George Soros. But the thing is, if you want to hire basically, and I'm not saying he should hire a Wall Street titan, but if you want to hire a big guy from Wall Street, chances are over the last 30 years, they worked for Julian Robertson, Michael Milken, or George Soros. But of course, just the Soros affiliation has gotten Trump somewhat soured on Scott Bessent. Now, Howard Lutnick is a super slick sales guy, but definitely doesn't have the economics pedigree that Bessent does. But Elon Musk backed him this weekend. He's a guy who could shake things up. But the Wall Street Journal put it out today. The Treasury Secretary is the one place that we don't need a shakeup. We need to stay the course, right? We need to make sure the bond market that's starting to get panicked doesn't panic. And then suddenly today we hear a few new names, Mark Rowan, who's the chairman of Apollo. And my phone was legitimately on fire this morning from 15 different people like, yes, Mark Rowan, kind of showing that that investors on Wall Street don't want it to be a Howard Lutnick. They want it to be a Rowan, if not Scott Bessent. What are you hearing?
Well, I mean, usually, there is an establishment preference for the safer pick, right? I mean, especially in the financial markets. Scott Bessent would probably be seen as a safer pick. I think in this case, Trump does almost by definition want to shake this up. I think the success, he almost doesn't want to acknowledge that there has been a successful economy under the Biden administration and the Treasury is in a good place right now. He would actually like to, and well, first of all, also trade is going to be central to this. And he is going to need someone who is extremely supportive of his tariff ideas, no matter what direction that goes in. So this is more of a traditional kind of, kind of a beauty pageant kind of Trump pick, whereas these others are more brute force, sort of will to sort of, look, you must vote for Matt Gaetz or you must vote for Pete Hegseth or something like that. They're kind of happening in parallel, but they're also all connected.
Okay, yeah, but in those cases, Matt Gaetz and Pete, these would be the opportunities of a lifetime. If you're Scott Bessent, if you're Mark Rowan, you are already worth borderline $1 gazillion. Sure. You might not actually, you want the power, but you might not want the headache, which is why, guys like Kevin Warsh, whose names have been thrown around, many people say he doesn't want to be Treasury Secretary. He wants to be Fed chair. They want the power, but they don't actually want to be tied to Trump, where he has much more control of you, and he doesn't in the case of the Fed chair. Carol, what do you think? Do you think he just needs whomever is going to go the farthest on his tariff plan? Because, yes, Trump wants a guy he can control, but Donald Trump does not want the economy, and specifically the stock market, to go sideways or down.
No, and I think actually, Steph, on this panel, you're the most well-versed in this entire topic, and you could run this show all by yourself. But I would say, don't count out Donald Trump's desire for drama and not being able to figure out until a little later that his choice wasn't the best. I mean, let's remember how many chiefs of staff he had. Let's remember how many Pentagon secretaries he had. Let's remember how many press secretaries he had. He changes his mind a lot. And I don't necessarily think that in this first move, he is thinking to himself the entire time, oh, I have a brilliant choice who is going to be perfect for the economy. He may think that, but whether or not that's reality is another matter.
Well, I think he really likes really big, powerful, successful guys heading on down to Mar-a-Lago and kissing his ring. I mean, chances are they never even wanted to go to Mar-a-Lago, and now they're dying to join. Let's talk about Matt Gaetz, Donald Trump's pick for Attorney General. Mark, you just mentioned him. The House Ethics Committee is meeting on Wednesday to decide what they're going to do with this report on the investigation into him. I know what I think. How important do you think it is for the American people to see what's in this report?
Oh, I think it's hugely important. I think most senators would agree with this, although they are just walking on such eggshells around Trump. And that's part of the bigger discussion about, really these big four nominations that are quite controversial. If you consider Gaetz, Hegseth, Kennedy, maybe Tulsi Gabbard would be the four. I mean, the question is, will there be a bunch of senators who lock arms and basically say, we want to we don't want any of these people. I mean, it would be quite a bold step. And I think in general, you sort of have to assume that Republicans, when confronted with Donald Trump in this day and age, will bow to him, because that's been the precedent. But I think, Gaetz is really the tip of the spear here, because we're going to see, or we're not going to see, this ethics report come out. It's obviously radioactive, I think, the stuff in there, and I don't think they want it to go out.
Remember when people couldn't get confirmed because it was unclear if they paid their nannies' taxes? Leanne, the New York Times is reporting that Donald Trump is also standing by his man, Pete Hegseth, for Defense Secretary. Hegseth was accused of sexual assault back in 2017. He denies it, but he did reach a financial settlement with his accuser. What are you hearing from Senate Republicans on both Hegseth and Gaetz?
Yeah, so there's an interesting dynamic happening on Capitol Hill right now. Senate Republicans, as Mark mentioned, are very afraid of going against Donald Trump. And the full pressure campaign from Donald Trump and his allies haven't yet started. But I will say that Matt Gaetz is individually, he's calling senators and asking them if he's going to get a fair shake in his confirmation hearings. I also have reporting that Donald Trump and people close to Trump are also calling senators. Instead of pressuring at this point, they're asking questions. They're inquiring if the nominees are able to make it through the Senate. And so I think that there is a little bit of an assessment happening now, but I don't expect Donald Trump to back down. He's likely to stand by his people. As far as senators are concerned, I've seen a major shift over the past week since these nominees have been mentioned. At first, there was shock, and then there was mini outrage. And now, as these senators are having these conversations with Trump transition, with sometimes Trump, with the nominees themselves, they seem a lot more open to allowing this, at least the process, move forward. For example, there were calls last week by Republican senators for this ethics investigation or for this ethics report to be released. Now, just tonight, talking to Republican senators, including John Cornyn, Thom Tillis, who are saying, wait, we might not need this ethics report after all. The committee is going to do a complete investigation. And so we're seeing a lot of backsliding from Republicans, and it's proof that it's going to be really difficult for these Republicans to go against the president.